Hello and welcome to yet another section of our project management professional training program. We're still in the week 1 and module 1, and of course we're still looking into the foundational aspects of this course, the introduction to project management, and of course the PMI framework. So today we're going to be discussing the components of the PMBOK guide. All right, we've talked about the PMBOK, that it is the standard for project management. All right, herein you have the principles, all right, time tested and time proven principles for managing projects. All right, so today we're going to be looking at the components in this guide. And of course you're making progress, haven't gotten thus far. All right, now before we proceed, we have to understand that the PMBOK guide actually provides a structured framework for effective project management. All right, it gives you a structure, it gives you a methodology to follow in the pursuance of the activities that are meant to deliver your project. All right, so when you understand these components, it equips you to be able to navigate the complexities of projects. It actually gives you the tools you need to navigate a complex project environment, especially the one we'll have in today's fast-paced and fluid organizations. All right, so without further ado, let's get into the subject proper. Okay, so what are these components we're actually talking about? All right, when we talk about components of the guide, we're referring to fundamental elements. All right, fundamental elements and chapters that make up the project management body of knowledge guide from the Project Management Institute, PMI. Okay, so those elements and those chapters make up the PMBOK guide, which is the body of knowledge. Right, so the body of knowledge, which is the PMBOK from the PMI, is divided into these chapters. So we're going to be looking at them, and they comprise key components that, when effectively managed, result in their successful completion. Now, you have to realize that projects comprise key components that, when effectively managed, result in their successful completion. This guide identifies and explains these components. All right, so if you want to successfully complete your project and manage it effectively throughout its life cycle, you have to pay attention to these components we are going to be discussing in this section. Now, the various components interrelate with one another during the management of a project. So in this section, we're going to look at them individually, and then you'll be able to see the interconnection between them. All right, so that when you're managing your project and you're coming across these elements, you're going to have insight into how they relate with one another, and that will help you in effectively navigating them and working with them towards the successful completion of your project. Okay, so let's look at the interrelationship between them. As you can see in this diagram below here, so the first thing you have there is the project life cycle, which is right here. This is a series of phases that a project passes through from start to completion. Right, so the project life cycle is the whole body of the project, and it comprises different phases. All right, so as you can see here, this is the project life cycle. You have the starting phase, which is starting the project. We have the organizing and preparing. All right, this is another phase. All right, and then we have carrying out the work, which is the third phase, and then finally you have ending the project. Okay, so literally we can say the project has 4 broad phases: the starting, the organizing, the carrying out or the execution, and then the ending or the exit phase. All right, so this is what make up the project life cycle. All right, and then after that you also have the project phase. Like you've been hearing me talk about phase. They are a collection of logically related activities that culminate in the completion of one or more deliverables. So within this project life cycle, now as you can see in this diagram, you have these phases here. All right, now within this we have the starting phase. So here you have a series of activities, and these activities are logically related, okay, to be able to complete this phase and then come up with a deliverable. So that deliverable or those set of deliverables now serve as inputs for the next phase. All right, they serve as inputs for the next phase. So coming here, you now have activities, all right, which are integrated together using the output from this phase, which now becomes an input into this phase. So you now come up with a deliverable or a set of deliverables or outcomes. So those ones will now serve as inputs, right? The outputs from here now will now serve as inputs to this next phase, and you now integrate them together with other resources, all right, and then carry out the activities within this phase, and then you move into this phase using the output from here, which now becomes input into this next phase. So that's what this is saying in a nutshell: a collection of related activities which culminate in the completion of one or more deliverables. All right, so another component is what we call phase gates. This is a point held at the end of a phase, also referred to as kill point, stage gate, or phase review. All right, so a stage gate is the end of a particular phase. All right, for example, here now, this line that you're seeing here is a phase gate. All right, is the end of this phase when the output or the deliverables are ready, okay, and then they are ready to be moved into the next phase. All right, so that's what we call phase gate. Another component is the project management processes. Now these are a series of project management activities managed within a project life cycle to produce one or more output from one or more inputs by using appropriate tools and techniques. All right, series of project management activities managed within a project life cycle to produce one or more output from one or more inputs by using appropriate tools and techniques. So within this project life cycle, all right, you have processes inside of them, all right, inside of each of the phases. All right, so you have the project life cycle as the whole body, and you now have phases within the project life cycle, and then within these phases you have processes, which we call the project management processes. All right, they are a set of activities, okay, which you put together. So when you're done with the integration or putting together of these activities, you now have what we call outcome or deliverables from this particular phase, which now serves as an input to the next phase. Does it make sense? All right, so I believe you get that. Okay, so subsequently we're still going to talk about these ones, the process groups. All right, we have project management processes, and we have in these processes we have a conglomeration of different processes which we now call process groups. The processes are grouped together, all right, in terms of their relationship or the similarity of their structure, okay, and then they form what we call process groups. We have the initiation process group, the planning process group, the execution process group, monitoring and control, and then closing process groups. All right, so those process groups now form what we call knowledge areas. Do you understand that now? So we'll look at that in more details. But first, let's take a closer look at this project management process groups. All right, now zeroing in on this particular component, you have 5 process groups here. Okay, all right, the process group begins from this top circle over here. All right, begins from the top circle over here. That's the initiation phase. That's the first process group. And then you go to planning. All right, go to planning. From planning you go to execution. All right, from execution you go to controlling. All right, I think this diagram was not properly done. From execution you go to controlling, then from controlling you come over to closing. You're supposed to go like this: initiation, planning, execution, controlling, and then finally closing. All right, so this is how the process group works. So that's what you have there, the initiation group. All right, group of processes. Like I said, the process groups are a group of processes. All right, and those processes are a set of activities which are put together. Okay, so when you talk about the initiation process group, these are processes performed to define a new project or phase of a new project. All right, so when you're starting out a new project, whether it's a construction project, whether it's a product development project, whether it's a research project, whether it is a capacity building project or a construction project or a survey, whatever it is, all right, there is always a starting point. So the initiation process group or the initiating process group is the set of processes that actually define the start of that particular project, if it's the overall project or maybe a phase of the project. So this is the starting point. All right, for example, if you're handling a project for a product development, first of all you want to look into the need. What is the need that the customer have? What is the problem that this product is meant to solve? All right, you don't just come up with a product. The product is meant to solve a problem. All right, is this actually a need? Is this actually something that the customers want? So you want to find that out. You want to do a market analysis, all right, or a customer analysis to even find out whether they need this product, all right, in the first place before going into the resources or the raw materials that you need to be able to develop that product. All right, so if you just go purchasing raw materials and putting all the resources together, trying to develop a new product for a market that doesn't even exist in the first place or doesn't even care about the product that you're developing, at the end of the day you will discover that you've only wasted time, wasted resources, and it will amount to nothing. All right, so that's why the research phase is a good starting point, all right, for that particular product development project. All right, so that research phase will now be part of the initiating process groups. I hope you get that clear. All right, so next is the planning process group. These are processes required to establish the scope of the project, refine the objectives, and define the course of action required to attain those objectives. All right, so from the initiation you now move to the planning. All right, now you've initiated the processes, all right, that you are that are needed to get this project started. Let's say, for example, in the product development scenario we're looking at, you've done your market research, you've identified your target market. You now have the awareness, or you are very sure that this is a product that is actually needed and you know the people that are in need of it. You know where they are. All right, you have all their data in terms of their demography and all that, and then you also understand how they want the products, because it's not only to be aware that they need the product. How do they want it? In what formats do they want it? When do they want it? How much are they willing to pay for it? How are they going to consume it? How are they going to use it? All right, so you now have this information, all right, from your research in the initiation phase. Okay, so now you start putting plans together based on the information that you have. All right, this product has to have this feature and that feature. Okay, so how are we going to get this done? All right, so that at the end of the day we'll come up with something that is exactly what the customer says they want. All right, so that's all the processes that go into the planning phase. All right, you refine the scope, you define the establish the scope, you refine the objectives, and then you start you define the course of action, what and what you need to do to be able to attain those objectives. So next is the execution. All right, now you've done your initiating, you've done your planning, so it is time for the rubber to hit the road. It's time to hit the ground running. All right, so in the execution phase, these are the processes you perform to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy the project requirements. All right, so this is the work part of it. All right, the analyzing part of it, the research part of it, the talking part of it is done. Now is the time to do the work. Okay, you got to do the work. So that's what the execution is all about. So you are executing the plan. You cannot just be executing, you know, just anything. So there has to be a plan, a well laid out plan, all right, based on the initiation phase, all right, and the information that you have gathered, the requirements from the stakeholders, their expectations. Okay, so now you are executing that. Okay, and then another thing is that execution is not done in abstract, right? It's not done in isolation. When you're executing, you have to be in touch with the stakeholders, do you understand, to carry them along. We're going to look into this more in detail when we're talking about stakeholder management. All right, it's very, very important to have them on board while you are executing, okay, to make sure that at the end of the day everyone is in agreement. All right, and also to get their buy-in when the final product is done. Okay, so next is the monitoring and controlling phase. This is the set of processes required to track, review, and regulate the progress and performance of the project. So now this monitoring and control process group also goes hand in hand with the execution process groups. All right, because when you are executing, you are getting the work done, you have to be measuring. All right, you have the specifications that you have outlined in the planning phase. All right, you have everything there, the requirements from the stakeholders, the expectation, the specification. If it's a product, you have the requirements from the stakeholders in terms of the color, the size, the shape, the texture, the features, whatever it is, both the internal and external features, depending on the kind of product. All right, so as the execution is going on, you are making your measurements, you are monitoring, you are controlling the activities that go into the execution of that particular product or the development of that particular product, to ensure that at the end of the day you have the exact representation of the specification that the stakeholders have actually stated that they require. I hope this makes a lot of sense. So you are tracking the progress. Okay, you're tracking the process to ensure that anyone who is making any input, the output is going to give you exactly what the stakeholders require. Okay, so they want the product to be this particular color. All right, you're putting that together to ensure that you get the right color. They want it to have this particular feature in terms of functionality. all right? Maybe is a mobile an electronic gadget. They want it to have this particular feature, all right? So you are testing as it's going on to ensure that at the end of the day it comes out with that particular feature, all right? So all this monitoring and controlling regulation, is going on in pari passu with the processes in the execution phase to ensure that at the end of the day you come up with the needed requirements. And then finally you have the closing process group. These are the processes performed to formally complete or close the project. This is here, right? Is here. So this one is the end phase of the project. So when you have finally come up with the requirements or something that looks exactly like the requirements of what you have in the planning or in the project management plan. Okay, so at this point in time you can start rounding off the project or the phase. Okay, so these are the initiation, the process groups in project management. All right. So now let's talk about the project management knowledge areas. Remember in the diagram we saw the process groups, all right, feeding into the knowledge areas. So let's talk about the knowledge areas. All right, and these are we have the integration management, the scope, the schedule, the cost, the quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholders. All right, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 knowledge areas in project management. And as a project manager, you are coordinating all these knowledge areas together, working in sync with the process groups to ensure that you get what is required at the end of the day. Okay, firstly you have the project integration management. That's this one, integration management. This includes the project management activities to identify, define, combine, unify, and coordinate the various processes and project management activities within the project management process groups. Okay, so integration management has to do with identifying and coordination of the various processes, all right, within the process groups all together. Okay, you're putting all of them together and then feeding them into the project. All right, so that will definitely take you to the next knowledge area, which is the scope, the project scope management. Now this includes the processes required to ensure that the project includes all the work required to complete the project successfully. So when you're talking about the scope, you're talking about the boundary. All right, what are the boundaries within this project? Because every project is unique. Every project has unique specifications. Every project has its own objectives. All right, so you have to have boundaries. Right, and that is what we call the scope, the boundary of the project. So it lets you know what activities, what work is required within this project, all right, that is going to bring about the outcome that you desire, all right, or that the stakeholders require. Okay, so it's not just about you now, the project manager. But not only that, scope management also helps us to be able to exclude, all right, what is not required in the project. I don't know if you're getting it now. So it helps you to be able to stay focused on the right things. All right, now the worst thing that can happen to anybody is to do the wrong things perfectly. Okay, you do the wrong things perfectly, you are still wrong. All right, so you want to know what is included in the project and what is not included. What are those activities that are not meant to be part of the project? So you're not going to waste time on them. You're not going to waste resources on them. Okay, so that's what scope management is all about. Now that brings us to the next knowledge area, which is schedule management. Now you know what you're meant to do and what you are not meant to do. Now you now begin to talk about allocation of time. All right, allocation of time. How do you use your time wisely? So project schedule management is all about managing the time or the duration that you have to carry out the activities within the phase or the project. All right, so this includes all those processes performed to manage the time, the timely completion of the project. So if you know you have a month, you have a year, all right, to get this product delivered. So every activity within the project that goes into the creation of that product has to be monitored, okay, and they have to be done within the time that has been allocated to them. So that's what we call schedule management, ensuring that whatever activity that is meant to be done within a specified time is done within that time. All right. Okay, so in continuation, that takes us to the next knowledge area, which is the costs. All right, the fourth knowledge area. This includes the processes involved in planning, estimating, budgeting, financing, funding, managing, and controlling costs, so the project can be completed within the approved budgets. All right, so at the beginning of the project, when you're drawing up the planning, you have a budget. So there is a specific set of funds that has been allocated for this project. Okay, this is how much we're going to spend in getting this project done. All right, so when you go into the project now, you start executing the project, you start carrying out the project, the cost management now begins. All right, so those activities, whatever it is you're doing, whether you're doing acquisition, you're doing procurement, you're doing renting or lending, you're making payments to workers or stakeholders or vendors or contractors, whatever it is. All right, you have to put systems and processes in place to ensure that whatever cost is allocated for a particular activity or a particular item or a particular purchase is actually done that way, nothing more. All right, nothing more. So that's cost management for you. All right, so at the end of the day, you realize that okay, your project is completed within the approved budget. So because that budget has to be approved, all right, before you start. So you don't want to go beyond that budget that has been approved. All right, because of course you don't have that other resources. That's why I would say a project works with limited funding. So the funding is limited. You don't have all the funds in the world. So you need to ensure that whatever fund has been allocated for this project is used judiciously for the project. I hope that makes sense. So that brings us to the next knowledge area, which is quality. Now, quality has to do with the specification, all right, or the feature or the design of the product or the outcome. All right, or it includes all the processes for incorporating the organization's quality policy regarding planning, managing, and controlling project and product quality requirements in order to meet stakeholder expectations. Okay, so at the initiation phase and at the initiation phase, because that's where you do collecting requirements, you collect stakeholders requirements, the specifications for the product. Okay, so they have specific requirements for each of the product or the service or the outcome of the project. So you need to put processes in place to ensure that at the end of the day, the quality is maintained. All right, and apart from that, the organization has its own quality policy. Okay, so you have to ensure that the quality policy of the organization is adhered to, all right, in producing that particular product or carrying out that project. Okay, so we'll move to the next knowledge area, which is resources. So that's resources. So we have project resource management. Now this includes processes required to identify, acquire, and manage the resources needed for the successful completion of the project. All right, so this is a very key aspect of your project management process, resource management, because when you are carrying out a project, you're going to need different kinds of resources. You need human resources, that's the people, all right, and you need different kind of people in different categories. You need experts, all right, subject matter experts, are professionals, all right, depending on what it is that you're doing or the project you're carrying out. You're going to need foremen, okay, you're going to need maybe loaders, unloaders, all right. You're going to need different sets of people, both skilled and maybe unskilled labor, all right. So in different areas of the project, depending on the size and complexity of the project you are carrying out, all right. So that's for the human resource. And then apart from that, you're also going to need material resources. You're going to need equipment, you're going to need raw materials, all right, machines, okay. So these are resources. And apart from that, you're also going to need funds are also resources, financial resources, all right. You're going to need information, data, all right. So you have different resources that you're going to be needing for your project. So project resource management has to do with identifying these resources they're going to require, whether they're human resources, information resources, financial resources, material resources, all right. So you identify them, and then you acquire them, and then you begin to manage their resources, manage their allocation, okay, to the various activities or the various aspects of the project throughout the life cycle for the successful completion of the project. So that's what resource management is all about. And that takes us to the next knowledge area, which is communications management. And this includes the processes required to ensure timely and appropriate planning, collection, creation, distribution, storage, retrieval, management, control, monitoring, and ultimate disposition of project information. Okay, so communication is key. In fact, it is one of the most important components of your project, because if you cannot get information across, how can people know what to do? All right, and if you cannot get information from people, how do you know what to do for them? All right, so from the beginning of the project, from the initiation to the planning, execution, monitoring and control to closing, you are going to be communicating all through. All right, you communicate to start, you communicate to do the work, you communicate to close. Okay, so the project communication management has to do with the planning of how you're going to collect the information, what type of information that you require from who, how you're going to collect it, how you're going to distribute the information, how you're going to disseminate the information, how you're going to store the information, what format you're going to use, what devices you're going to use, what media you're going to use. All right, if you're communicating with stakeholders, for example, you're sending information to them, or you plan to have a meeting with them, are you going to use what format are you going to use? Are you going to do it online, virtually, or is it going to be face to face? All right, if it's online, if it's virtual communication, are you going to do it via the phone? Are you going to use it via social media? Are you going to do it via conferencing platforms like Teams or Zoom, or are you going to send a mail? All right, so what form of communication are you going to use? So all this put together is what makes up the project communications management. Okay, so next we move on to risk management, project risk management. Now this includes the processes of conducting risk management, planning, identification, analysis, response planning, response implementation, and monitoring risk on a project. Okay, so like already established before, in every project you're going to encounter some risks, all right, challenges, factors which stand to impede the progress of your project, all right, things which stand to limit the project. So you're going to have to identify those things. What are those factors? All right, maybe stakeholders not complying, contractors not delivering the right materials or equipment. Okay, unplanned weather conditions, automobile accidents, in the workplace or in the project site, different kinds of risks. Okay, so you have to be able to identify what are those risks. You have to be able to analyze them, all right, and properly quantify them to ascertain the probability of occurrence and also the magnitude of the adverse effects that they can actually have on the project. And then you plan risk responses, all right, and then how are you going to implement those responses and also the outcome of those responses. All right, so there's a whole lot to all that. That's why it's called project risk management, and it's very key area if you want to ensure the successful completion of your project. It's something you need to put in place. All right, so next is the procurement management. Now you need to understand that these knowledge areas, they are not just this is not a hierarchical categorization of them. We're just talking about them in this order for the sake of simplicity, right? But it doesn't mean that one has to come before another. For example, it doesn't mean that risk has to come before procurement. You understand? They can go hand in hand together in any what do you call it now? In any sequence. Yes, in any sequence. All right. So the next is project procurement management. This includes processes required to purchase or acquire products, services, or results needed from outside the project team. All right, so we've mentioned the resources that you require, whether human resources or material resources or information resources for your project. So how are you going to bring them in? You don't have them within the project team or the project organization. So for example, you need machines to get your job done. You don't have that machine within the project organization. So you either have to purchase the machine or you rent the machine. Okay, so that's where procurement management comes in. First of all, you have to make a decision. Do you rent or do you purchase? Okay, now do you even need to go outside to get it? Can you make it within the project organization? So then we'll start talking about make or buy analysis. All right, so what are the cost implications? What are the time implications? So these are considerations that are necessary, all right, and they are all what we call the procurement management. And then even when you've made it or when you purchased it, you still have to manage that process as well. All right, what's the functionality, what's the durability, all right, and the maintenance, of course. So those things have to be managed. The contract itself, the payment terms, okay, the who's going to manage it, who's going to man the machine. All those things are part of the procurement management, or the processes that are involved in the procurement management. All right, so that's for that. Let's go to the last but not the least, which is stakeholder management. Now this includes processes required to identify the people, groups, or organizations that could impact or be impacted by the project, analyze stakeholder expectations and their impact on the project, and develop effective management strategies to engage stakeholders in project decisions and execution. Now this is very, very important, because from the beginning of the project to the end, you're going to be working with different set of people, different groups, different organizations, and these are all called the stakeholders. All right, so you want to keep them engaged, all right from the outset. Okay, so you want to have this in place right out of the gate. You want to be able to keep your stakeholders engaged from the beginning and throughout the life cycle of your project until the project is closed and delivered. Until it's done and dusted, you're gonna have to keep your stakeholders engaged, all right? Because you want to have their buy-in, all right? For example, your team. The team is part of the stakeholders, the subject matter experts that are working on the project. You want to keep them engaged. You want to be communicating with them, all right? You want to make decisions. They have to be part of the decision making, all right? And they are also going to be the one to make use of the outcomes, all right? Of those decisions. They are going to have to put it to work. Okay, so you want to have the stakeholders engaged through stakeholder management and throughout the life cycle of the project. Okay, so those are the 10 knowledge areas that we have in project management. And if you can get all this together, I can guarantee you that you have a wonderful project execution and delivery. All right, so let's look at another key component, which has to do with processes and interactions. All right, now the knowledge area we just talked about contains specific processes that guide project management activities. For example, the scope management knowledge area includes processes like collect requirements and control scope. Okay, so within this knowledge area, you have what we call processes. Those processes are activities, sets of activities, okay, that's actually meant to get something done, to come up with a particular deliverable. All right, so you have to take note of that. That's why we usually say a project is a process of processes. Okay, so the next thing is interaction. Now these processes are interrelated, they're interconnected. That's why I say you don't have to do them in any particular sequence. Even the knowledge area, you don't have to do them in any particular sequence. All right, so we can be talking about maybe sequence somewhat when we're talking about the process groups. Okay, and even at that, they are also interconnected and interrelated, especially when it comes to the execution and monitoring and control. They go together. Okay, so they're all interconnected, and then the processes from different knowledge areas interact within each process group to ensure a comprehensive and holistic approach to project management. So they all interact. So at the end of the day, you have a holistic approach to managing your project. All right, so let's look at some key takeaways from this section. Obviously, you've been able to understand the significance of the components of the guide in the PMBOK framework. We've also recognized the 5 project management process groups and their purpose in helping you execute your project successfully, right, or complete your project successfully. You've also been able to familiarize yourself with the 10 knowledge areas and their respective processes, of course, and now you appreciate the interconnections among the processes, knowledge areas, and the process groups. Okay, so at this point, I want to say congratulations for coming thus far. We've been able to explore in detail the components of the PMBOK guide. In the next section, we'll be talking about tailoring, right? Tailoring. How do you tailor? Now, it's not like a fashion designer or some tailor, Obioma, that puts clothes together or men's clothes. No, that's not the kind of tailoring we are talking about. Tailoring in project management is something beautiful, something that produces something great, something unique. And we're going to be discussing that in the next section. All right, so we're going to be looking at that and its importance and how do you actually adapt it to your project management approaches, to different projects. All right, so I'll see you in the next class. Keep up the excellent work and we'll continue our journey towards mastering project management. Cheers. Bye for now.